Hi, I'm the Reverend Adrienne Cook, Priest Associate at Trinity Cathedral in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm here today to talk to you about the Enneagram 6, the Loyal Skeptic. And this interview is part of a series that asks the question, what is love, through the lens of each Enneagram type. If you're looking for some back history on the Enneagram from a Christian perspective, you can check out the first video in this series, The Ancient Spirituality of the Enneagram, that connects Christian monasticism and modern psychology with some of the backbone of the Enneagram structure and how personalities are shaped and formed. And if you would like to learn about your own Enneagram type, the best way to do that in the narrative tradition, which is the tradition I'm being trained in, is to listen to these typing interviews. But you can also check out the slew of resources online. But in reality, you're the only one who knows the motivations of your own heart. And so you're the only one who can name which personality structure you lead with. So I invite you to watch these videos and be a part of our online community by participating in these forums, which happen every couple of weeks at 11:15 live on trinitycleveland.org. We're going to begin with some readings from Christian scripture on the question, what is love?
1 John 4, 7 and 8. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love.
1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails.
So what is love? The question we'll hold at the forefront of our minds. And as a Christian community, we may be holding these definitions of God as love and some of the acts of love that can be found in 1 Corinthians. We're also going to think a little bit about how modern psychology and medicine have merged through the Enneagram to explore what love looks like through the three centers of intelligence. And in the Enneagram, that is the mind, the body, and the heart. And the way I sometimes approach this topic in Enneagram classes is to ask you the question, did you know that you have more than one brain? And when we're with the head types, that can be such a shocking concept that not only is there a large chunk of brain matter up here, the head types know that well. And today we're looking at Enneagram 6s, one of the head types, and they know that well. But there's also brain matter around the heart. There's brain matter lining the intestines. And so our gut is another kind of mini brain, if you want to just be playful with the concept. And so is our heart. And there are type structures of personality in the Enneagram that lead with those places. But we are starting with the most familiar brain that we all have. And that's with the Enneagram 7, 6, and 5. And last week we had a chance to look at the Enneagram 7. If you haven't yet had a chance to watch that video, you can find it on Trinity Cleveland's website, YouTube channel. And this Enneagram 6 interview will also be up there later this week. Refresher for some of you, but what love looks like through the lens of the Enneagram. So we begin with some brain science. And brain scientists tell us that our love map is based on patterns of the limbic system formed by our body and emotions called limbic attractors, which organize our communication with others and evoke a response from others. Love from the head center is often described in Christian tradition as charity or agape, an experience that transcends personal gain. It's where we get the idea that God is love. Now, understanding the three roles of our centers of intelligence will help us appreciate how we already love others and how we can further develop our capacities in the head, the heart, and the body. We'll learn something of all these three centers, and today we're going to focus on the head type 6. And the emotional habit of each of these head types is a unique manifestation of fear. And last week we talked about 7's FOMO, 7's fear of missing out, and a kind of vigilance that occurs with the 7 because of that fear of missing out, and a different kind of vigilance that we'll see with the type 6. Now, type 6 is categorized as one of the emotional real types. As a type 8 myself, I am also an emotional real type, so I know this quality well. And it often takes on a posture for that type structure of being against whatever's happening externally, a posture of being against and being honest and real and pushing back just a bit. Now, as a head type, this is a fear reaction for the type 6. And the 6 either recognizes their fear and chooses to run from it, or perhaps habitually runs from it without choosing it necessarily, or they ignore that fear and they run toward whatever is making them afraid. And we often call these the phobic and the counterphobic stances of the type 6. And there are some different theories out there about phobic and counterphobic stances, but I tend to appreciate the theories that sort of meet in the middle and sit in the gray space. So some theories say there are type 6s who are only phobic and run away from the things that scare them, and there are type 6s that are only counterphobic, that run toward the things that scare them. But my sense has been that it's a little bit of both for every individual. So we want to hold the space today that it's possible that our 6s on the panel can have at times both phobic and counterphobic responses to fear. And they may lean more heavily on one or the other based on how stressed they are or how secure they are with whatever's going on in life, just like the rest of us. But 6s do have a special relationship with fear that's sort of unlike any of the others in the Enneagram type. And we'll learn a little bit more why that is when we talk about where the 6's position is in the Enneagram structure, which is in the triangle. And so we'll talk more about that when we get to that slide. But first, let's meet our panelists. I invite our panelists today, if you would, please introduce yourself, tell us your name, and tell us what your Episcopal connection is, how you got connected to this class, and why you know that you're a 6, or at least you guess that you might be a 6. Rich, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name's Richard Israel, and I am a Lutheran minister, but served for 12 years as the associate rector at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Cleveland Heights until I retired in 2018. And then I did a short interim at St. Luke's in Cleveland last year for 4 months, and attend Trinity Cathedral when I'm not working somewhere else. So that's my Episcopal connection. I vacillated for a while and trying to figure out my type, as probably everybody does. I read books about the Enneagram originally, but a year ago, my wife and I attended a 2-day workshop called Spirit of the Enneagram, led by a teacher of ours, Richard Groves, who runs the Sacred Art of Living Center in Bend, Oregon. And on the second day of that workshop, we had panels. We were asked overnight to think what number we were and or might be, and to try on different things. And so I thought I was a 9 originally. Then I thought I was a 1, and then thought maybe I could be a 6. And in the course of being on a panel of 6s and being asked questions, all of a sudden the resonance came through that while I behave in certain ways, when push comes to shove, I grew up with a sense of maybe wariness about the world and things that were beyond my immediate understanding and knowledge, and a sense that things could easily get out of control if I weren't in my safe zone. I had this image of being a child and watching the Walt Disney movie Fantasia with Mickey Mouse, commanding the buckets in the Sorcerer's Apprentice to mop the floor, and all of a sudden they multiply and multiply and multiply, and he's out of control and needs the sorcerer to come back and get everything back in control. So that hit me as a 6 type. So I'll stop there.
That's a wonderful image. Thank you. And I appreciate you naming the Enneagram teacher that I've heard of him and his work. And is it Sacred, name the center again?
The Sacred Art of Living Center.
Yes, yes. A worthwhile website to check out. There's some really great resources there. Well, Debbie, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you are connected to the Episcopal Church, and how you know that you could be a type 6.
I've been in the Episcopal Church since 1973. I was raised a fierce Presbyterian. That's what I tell people, and there's still a lot of that in me. But I was confirmed in the Episcopal Church the spring of '73, and have been there ever since, and have slowly learned to embrace some things that if my very Presbyterian grandfather knew that I crossed myself, he'd probably roll over in his grave. And how do I know I'm a 6? Well, I think I know. I'll say that I did, and I noticed that Char Nichols is one of the is watching and listening. She there was a thing at Trinity that was done. I'm thinking it's been maybe as much as 7 years ago, a culture of call. And I did that, and we started with one of the things we worked with was now discover your strengths, and another thing we worked with was the Enneagram. So after doing all the questions for the Enneagram, it came out that I maybe was a 2, maybe had a better chance of being a 4, and maybe a 6. So I eliminated the 2 pretty quickly, and then kind of thought, well, am I a 4 or a 6? And decided that the 6 made more sense to me. I mean, just that it fit better. So that's kind of how I got there. But I don't think I've ever thought of it in some of the ways that you've been presenting this, Adrian. So I'm interested in, as I thought about what it means as a skeptic. If it's something I'm comfortable with, I'm fine. But if I'm not comfortable with it, or it's something I don't know anything about, that's scary. And so I will, and once I figure it out, once I have a way to figure it out, I'm going, yeah, okay, well, what in the heck was so scary about that? And I can remember as a kid, very young, being afraid of airplanes and the dog that lived up the street from us. So at any rate, that's, I'm learning a lot about myself just by the way you're presenting this.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that, Debbie. And thank you for sharing a little bit, giving us a little glimpse into how you began your process of learning you might be a type 6. A few catchphrases and concepts I just want to highlight from even just listening to these introductory words from Rich and from Debbie. Some highlighted moments of talking about thinking, needing to think through things. Phrases like, oh, that makes sense. It made sense to Debbie. I remember you saying, not knowing is scary. Those are some of the signs of a head type functioning, and that the focus of attention is on the brain matter and the mind. And this is the place of where the assumption is that security will come. If I can figure it out here, I'll be safe and secure. But it never seems to happen for the type 6. And so it's a perpetual in this place, right? The focus of attention goes there. And part of exploring the centers of intelligence with each type is this idea of finding some flexibility in your type structure so that you can begin to tap into the body and the heart also as centers of intelligence. And I heard some of that in Rich's story, where he's saying, man, I thought I was a 9 at first and then a 1. And there's really good reasons we can talk about for mistyping both of those ways as a type 6. But especially that movement toward 9 for a 6 often comes when the 6 is able to begin to tap into the heart center of intelligence and the body center of intelligence. So I don't want to take away too much of the story of our two types. So we're going to invite more reflections from them. But first I want to give a little snapshot from Helen Palmer. This is her snapshot. She's one of my teachers of the Enneagram. And she names the basic proposition for the type 6 is that love and protection are gained by vigilance and endurance. The habitual focus of attention from these types is a focus of attention toward threat, toward hazard, toward difficulty. And in the Enneagram, we like to say that action follows attention. So wherever your attention is going to be, that's where energy is going to go. Energy follows attention. Action follows attention. So the attention of type 6 is on threat and hazard and difficulty. And so energy and action tend to go toward mitigating threats and hazards and difficulties. Now, some things that loyal skeptics tell us about themselves is that they are often preoccupied with safety and security concerns, whether it's the dog or the airplane or relationships. But the type 6, it often is a little bit more diffused, this fear. Like it can be the dog or the airplane or a relationship. And one of the ways that we know can often discern whether it's a mistype between a 2 or a 6 is that 2s often have fear that's surrounding relationships primarily, and 6s, it's a little bit more diffused. So 6 can mistype as almost all of the numbers. It's a really, really unique personality structure in the Enneagram. So there's going to be a lot of different points of contact with other numbers and ways to differentiate whether you're a type 6 or another number. So loyal skeptics, as they're called, preoccupied with safety and security concerns, greet pretty much everything with a doubting mind and contrary thinking. Even if they're not naming it because they like you or they want you to like them, their mind is probably questioning or going contrary to whatever's out there just to test it, just to feel it out. just to make sure that an alternate perspective is being brought in. This leads to a common position of questioning, and it often shows up in questioning other people or questioning authorities. Can I trust you? That's a big 6 concern. And because they're weighing so many different outcomes and options all the time and possibilities, this procrastination can be a way that this anxious questioning looks to other people, sort of putting off some decision making in areas at times, or failing to complete a project because there's so many different contingencies that need to be accounted for. So I'll stop there, and I'm just curious, in that brief intro, is anything there resonating with either of you, where you'd like to say something about it?
I'm sitting here chuckling because all of that sounds so familiar. The business of weighing options, or weighing, you can look at it this way or this way or this way or this way. The idea of security, and what the security of what I know, rather than as opposed to taking the risk of something that I don't know. I think of a couple of times in my work life where I was offered other jobs, and I went back. Rather than wanting to do those, rather than saying yes, I said no because the situation I was in was something I was comfortable with. Those are just some very quick things that come to mind.
So an attraction toward the security of what you already had.
Yes.
That you not even really want to entertain the possibility of
yes. And that's been kind of a big deal. That was a big deal a couple of times when I was working.
Mm-hmm.
I would resonate as well with kind of the paralysis of analysis kind of idea, that it's so easy to weigh so many things that could go wrong, and there must be a right answer, and I have to figure it out, and if I can't do it, maybe I'll just wait and put it off. So that resonates with me. The other thing, though, I also like what you said about kind of integrating some of the heart and the body. One of the things that has saved my life is my marriage. My wife is my definitely better half, and has taught me many things and gotten me out of my fear at times. And about 20 years ago, she really pushed me to try yoga. And, we both love to say we found Jesus on the yoga mat, because we do yoga daily. And just lying there on the mat and then going through exercises and doing breath work, you get this sense of a whole different understanding of your body and mind. Body can take precedence over the mind for a while, and it's made a huge difference for me in terms of maybe getting me out of my certitude that the head is the only way to look at things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Rich. Regardless of your Enneagram type, just being human, the body is such an important place of information. And I've heard every single type structure name in some form that awareness and attention to the body has been a way for them to move toward that third center of intelligence. So for the type 6, the movement is toward being able to tap into the heart and open up the heart, and the body can often be the access point toward that place of knowing what you're really feeling, what you really want, what you really desire, and being able to rest in whatever decision that you make, even if it's just for a moment, to hold it and to name it. So I'm curious, Rich, was it around that time that you were wondering if you were an Enneagram 9, or what were some of the qualities that you were experiencing that made you think you might be a 9?
No, that was long before I had even heard about the Enneagram. But I think going back to why I thought I might be a 9 is that I've always been, I think, able to listen to other people and to try and I have a very strong sense of being part of a team and the importance of playing my role in a team and finding real meaning in helping everybody work together and mesh so that we achieve more than what any of us could do by ourselves. And so a 9, in my limited understanding, is someone who often helps mediate and try and harmonize where there's differences. And I've learned over years to be able to work with conflict and to that I have some skills at doing that, and that I guess that made me think, that I was more of a 9 than a 6 at that time.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. That's helpful to bounce off of. So one of the, I'm not going to give away a little bit too much for the 9s right now, so I apologize, 9s, if this causes any conflict in your life. But 9s do have this perception of being able to harmonize and to mediate. And when a 9 is at their best, they can do that, but it is a struggle for the 9, because the way that they keep the harmony is not by knowing their role in a group, but by completely disappearing from a group and just letting it all happen without them. And so that you were aware of your role in a group and wanting to bring harmony is a stronger argument that you would be a 6 rather than a 9, because you're aware of the importance of your contribution. And that takes a very long time for a 9 to be able to own that and feel empowered. And so one of the words that we commonly will hear from 6s is responsibility.
Oh yeah.
My responsibility.
Oh yeah.
Debbie, can you speak to that sense of responsibility? I saw you nodding your head at this role idea as Rich was talking.
Yeah, the idea of responsibility, that kind of undergirds so much of what I do or how I think, and I had some could hear some things what you were talking about in it, what Rich said about working as a group, working collaboratively with another person or others. I'm very comfortable with that now. Much more comfortable with that than having to be the one in front, and so I mean, the one without having others there to work with me, for the very same reason he said, the sum of the whole is greater than I mean, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But and so I guess I would say that, and the only thing else I could say about that has to do with when I'm in a group of, I think I'm aware of what my role is. Usually I am, rather than wanting to disappear. But This is all very interesting because I'm hearing so much. I'm hearing a lot of things that my mind says, oh yeah, I get that.
That's often what happens on these panels. We're like, oh, you think that way too? That's a 6 thing?
Yeah,
And
exactly. That's that's one of the things that I'm really finding so interesting about all of this.
yeah, and right, this is at the core of the work of the Enneagram. And I'm going to try to switch to my next slide here. Because if we remember, if you've listened to the talk on the spirituality of the Enneagram that I gave on some of the history of the Enneagram's work with desert monasticism, when we get to the type 6, we're trying to remember that this type structure, all these qualities of personality are not you. Rich is not a 6, Rich is Rich. And Debbie's not a 6, Debbie is Debbie. And learning about our type structures and the way that sin in the world has helped shape us in a certain kind of way, and our own experience of sin in our lives, whether it's in our childhood wounds or things that have happened in our life, or the way that we've responded to life, have shaped this personality structure to try to protect ourselves. But as we get older, we want to try to find flexibility to get out of this box. Now, as you're learning about your type structure, Rich may find out there are some things about the 6 he really likes and he wants to keep those. And Rich is going to own those and take those and choose to enact those things. Debbie might like it that she takes a lot of responsibility for things. That might be something you love about what you do. There may be times you don't want to take responsibility.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
You get this flexibility. The more you learn about your type structure, you then have the capacity to choose whether or not you want to manifest that quality. That's such a habit. And I see you nodding there a lot, Rich. Is that resonating with you, that sort of learning that comes with the Enneagram?
Sure. Just this sense that I have a choice, and that I don't have to rush in to save other people. And, I think that may be especially a male thing too, that men are supposed to, have the answers, or, and to be okay with, well, I can't control what other people are choosing, and maybe that's okay, and maybe I'll learn something from their choice if it's a good one. I personally think it's a bad one, but or at least I fear it's a bad one, but that I can let go of my need to have to be responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's some freedom in that too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, that's a word that people will often name as they're exploring their type structure and learning to find some flexibility, is this freedom. Even this image on the screen that I have right now, the sort of getting yourself out of the box that type structure tells you is you, and that you have to be this way, and that you're always going to be this way, and that's not true. Well, I'm going to switch to this next slide here as we continue our conversation. But I do want to invite Debbie. Did you have any more, after hearing Rich, did you have any more reflections that you wanted to give based on that sense of responsibility, or any pushback toward the idea that maybe that's a masculine quality, or at least that's Rich's experience? I'm curious what your experience as a woman has been.
Well, I could identify with what he said about fixing things, or being there to rescue. Again, these are my words, but that I know, well, I can fix something. I know how to, and so I would say that I'm not remembering exactly what word Rich used. I don't think it was fix or rescue, but those are words that resonated in my mind at the time. But
well, what I love about that is maybe that's even a gendered quality. We've all been conditioned in different ways, and so the fixing is something we'll often hear. I'm thinking of sort of that maternal image of trying to fix somebody or fix a situation. So I think it can be gendered in different ways, this expectation of our type structure.
So if I know how to do something, if I've gotten comfortable with knowing how to do something, and again, I'm kind of on, and whatever has gotten me to that place, then I say, well, I know how to do that. And then the challenge is to want to rush in and fix something that is really not mine to fix.
Yeah.
Okay, now you're rich. Yeah. And being able to, yeah, anyway, that's enough.
Well, and this is one of the ways a 6 and a 2 often mistype, is that 6s recognize their desire to help in this form of fixing, this sense of responsibility. And again, one of the differences is for the 6, that responsibility may have a more of a social quality or a generalized quality or a very specific group dynamic quality. And for the 2, it's often a more generalized relational push toward fixing or toward betterment of an individual rather than betterment of the group or of us all or society. Does that resonate from your 6 perspective?
Yes, that makes some sense. And again, everything I'm telling you, I'll say it makes sense to me. So I think that's a head type for sure.
You're
I know that's a head type for sure. But yeah, if I do, I can't do everything, but I can contribute something. I'm thinking something going on right now with the pandemic is that I can't do my normal go to St. Luke's for their pantry because it's too dangerous, because I could bring something home. Have to be careful not bringing home something to Bob. But I can contribute. But I found something else I can do that can help better. That maybe can help better everybody else who can be there.
And
That's a small thing, but
what's that thing, if you can give us an example?
well, it's not looking for masks. It's baking something to send in for them to have that is a treat.
So finding other ways to do your part.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and is that is a good way to put it as a 6. I was trying to find 6 language, so that works. That sense of doing your part and highlighting that sense of responsibility comes from that motivation.
Yeah, and I make something every couple of weeks, and I wrap them up individually and send them in, like 32 sets of cake or something like that for them to have over there, particularly in this tough time. That is something that and it's homemade, so it's a little treat for some others who are doing something I can't do, but I can contribute in that way.
Thank you. Rich, is there any examples you can give us of that sort of reflect some of the motivation of the 6 that might look like the helper or the fixing, or but reveal sort of the motivation of responsibility, wanting to do your part, wanting to play your role? Anything coming to mind?
You know, I just say in response to what, that beautiful example Debbie gave, it just, I felt myself feeling all warm all over. The thoughtfulness and the generosity of, being able to tailor a specific offering that she's making. I served at St. Luke's, so I know what it's like on Monday night with the pantry or Wednesday night with the food program. And that's just a beautiful image of going back to your idea of love that we started with. It's sort of making manifest, just this loving action and concern for other people. And that, to me, just sends chills up my spine. It's just really neat to see that sense of empathy and compassion and brought into fruition, in a way that's giving a gift to other people. It's just lovely.
Thank you.
I love the way you were describing this, Rich. I've heard sixes talk about the moments where some of the distrust of the world sort of fades into the background. Um, and it's almost like the world around them shimmers just a little bit, like this little bit of the recognition and the reality um, that there is something good and true in the world that's holding us all up. And something about the way you were describing and encouraging this in Debbie reminded me of that. Is that sort of some of the experience of that we're all being held and you know, God's love is real, or what were some of the words you would use to describe?
It feels holy. It feels like this is an image of the way the world is meant to be in God's master plan. You know, that we're all meant to be this beloved community and caring for one another and lifting each other up.
Mm.
It makes me feel really excited to see that whenever I get those glimpses.
And this is the world that the sixes are hoping that all of taking responsibility for one another, for our earth, for our communities. This is what we could build together if we'll just all do our part.
Yeah.
So now let's play with this idea of love. I'm curious if this phrase resonates with you all as sixes. Tough love. Tough love. And I'm thinking about tough love described as the need to speak truth to someone who's acting badly or caught in the grip of a destructive pattern. So it can go well with empathy. It's connected to empathy, but seeing and understanding what needs to happen for, let's say, love to be real takes priority over maybe worrying about feelings. Is tough love, can you speak to that as a six and what that might mean to you?
Sure, I can just say that, you know, I've had experiences over my ministry where people have told me that I have a gift of being able to speak the truth in love to them or someone else. And one of the things I learned, I studied years ago with a guy named Peter Steinke, who does a lot of work on dealing with conflict from a systems point of view. And I ended up about 20 years ago serving as the first intentional interim minister of the Northeastern Ohio Synod of the Lutheran Church here, and working in the congregation where I had been ordained that had been in major conflict. And I had to learn to self-differentiate and to be a non-anxious presence as they were healing from some real conflict. And at times, I had to be the person who called people on their behavior and said, this is not helpful to the system. And I'm never seeking out those opportunities, but I've learned that it's important to address conflict and to within my role. And if I am in a role as a leader responsible for a system, like the priest in a church or a pastor, I have to use that authority. And that somehow that's something I've grown more comfortable with over time.
Yeah, thank you. This is touching on something that, as an Enneagram 8, I have been impressed with. Six's ability to even though sixes are often afraid of the act of actually having to name what's wrong, that sense of responsibility seems to well up, and they're able to do it, even being fully aware of some of that fear. And as an Enneagram 8, where fear is something that I often deny, and we'll get to that when we look at the 8, I can deny the fear, and so I can just go ahead and be direct. But to know that it might hurt a relationship, even if it's just for a time, and yet to have that sense of responsibility be so strong that this thing needs to be said or done to make things right, I think is a really brave quality of 6s. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Debbie, as you were listening?
Let's see. The empathy piece, yeah, that resonates big time with me. The idea of tough love resonates. Again, when I discovered that years and years ago, and the idea that the loving response is a choice. What is the loving response here? Was something that I thought was really, I'm going, wow, I didn't know about that. Now I can remember, I'm just right off the top of my head, remembering a situation with my sister 3.5 years ago, where where we were coming from entirely different places, and I was really offended by what she said. But I was able to offer something. Have you ever thought about it this way? Now, I've had people say that to me many times. Have you ever thought about it this way? So but I was able to do that. I don't like conflict. I don't like it. And there are times when I think I don't say enough. But there's also this sense of tough love, and that it's not going to go away if you ignore it. In a group, or even with somebody else that you're having a conversation with, it doesn't go away by people getting, by each of us going to our own corner and wanting to duke it out, if you will. But I'm thinking on a one-on-one. But the tough love, yeah, that makes a lot. That again resonates very deeply.
I had two other thoughts that came to my mind hearing Debbie. And one is that it's what, for me, tough love is absolutely necessary when justice is at stake. And the real excitement for me, or learning for me, has been that when I've been able to be a conduit and for expressing tough love, it's also led to personal growth and a sense of, gee, I didn't know I had that capability in me, and I can learn that through taking on conflict in a nice, assertive way, not aggressive, that hopefully it can lead to growth personally and for the whole system, including the people who are the recipients of the tough love.
Right. Yeah, I want to highlight that Rich has used this concept of system thinking a few times, and that may be something particular to Rich, but it's also something that's not uncommon with 6s. And I want to take a look at the screen that I have up here, and take a look at the triangle at the center of the screen. Now, there's a lot of conjecture in Enneagram world, and some small studies that have happened that that pose that 6s may be the most common type structure that is out there. And 6s are one of the corners of this triangle in the Enneagram shape that brings balance to the system of the Enneagram. It sort of holds it together. And each of the numbers in the triangle do their own part to hold the tension of a space. And 6s are holding the tension of the head types. And so So 7s and 5s can have more extreme postures at times, because 6s are willing to try to hold that gray space, trying to bring us all back together. And that's why they can vacillate back and forth, because they're always trying to bring it back to the center and to the core, and to not lose anybody in that process. And so we often can see this pop out in ideas of justice and belonging and creating a beloved community. And from what I know from both of your lives and work and the things you give yourself to, this is very true in a real practical way in both of your lives. I'm going to wax on just a little bit more as we're slowly nearing our time and wanting to bring in some questions from the audience. But I want to just talk a little bit more about some of the Enneagram structure to give some structure to those who might be trying to figure out if this is their Enneagram type. So you've heard us talk a little bit about the movement from 6 to 9. And when 6s are just in their ego structure, focused on responsibility, very much aware of all the possibilities of things that could go wrong. That's one of the focus of attention toward hazard. When they're in a place of security and they move toward 9, 6s are able to know their role in a group and to speak out and to have their voice be heard, and they can do so with a kind of confidence in what is being said, even if they've thought through all of the options and they're mustering the courage just in that moment and holding their ground that moment. That quality sort of makes 6s the best 9s of the Enneagram. And I've heard there's one Enneagram teacher, I can't recall his name at the moment, but he talks about, this actually might have been Richard Rohr. It might have come from him. But this teacher talks about how each type structure is really just kind of the wounded number of the one that they go toward in health. So it's like the 6 was always meant to be that 9, to be that mediator, to be the one that brings us all together, the peacemaker. That's in the DNA of the type 6, and they're always striving toward that. But wounds and traumas and life have shaped a more fearful structure. But once that that courage emerges, 6s really do take on this peacemaker quality. And the inverse can happen as well when 6s are in a stressful place. They start to take on the less desirable qualities of the type 3. And we'll learn more about all the wonderful qualities of type 3. But when we look at it through the 6s lens, 6s and feeling anxious relationally and particularly, they can maybe start to flatter others or just want everything to be okay, and the anxiety of relationships can sort of well up, be a little bit self-promoting, but unsure of themselves as they do it. And those are some of the qualities that can show up when a type 3 is in a really stressful place, and they're highlighted for the 6 when they're in stress over a very long period of time. So those are some of the movements of that type. I do want to highlight one of the things that Rich brought up, which is the lookalikes between 6s and 1s. And it takes on a very specific quality. It's often a 6 with a 5 wing, and often a social subtype. And I don't know, Rich, if you know, if you've delved much into the subtypes.
No.
So these are some of the qualities of the Enneagram that make it more diverse in appearance than just these 9 types. Everybody has just one core type, one of the 9 types. But you can have wings where you tap into some of the resources on a number that's on either side of your number. So the 6 can have a 5 wing or a 7 wing. Then there are these instincts for social or self-preservation or one-to-one contact. And it's often 6s that have a social bent, that their focus of attention is on systems, and they have kind of a cool dispersed energy of wanting to be flittering about out in the world and bringing us all together and having systemic change happen for the better. Those types can often mistype as a type 1, which is the perfectionist. And there's a strong desire to name what is right and what is wrong, and to make positive changes. And so just name that for those that have felt like you have a lot in common with 6, but you also have been wondering if you're an Enneagram 1. And I'll say that 1s usually do not mistype as 6s, but 6s will often mistype themselves as a 1. And I know that Rich went through some of that. So you might want to explore some of the subtypes there and look at a little bit into the social subtype and see if that resonates with you. Here.
Oh, we do have a new question.
Oh, okay. Let's go with it.
Where do we go for the best test from Jan?
Oh, well, how about Rich or Debbie? Have you all done any testing in your life, whether it's online or with teachers, or how have you slowly explored that you're a type 6?
Mine came from whatever test we used, and I don't remember what it was. I'd have to go see if I can find the information. Shar might remember because she was one of the facilitators for that culture of call. And so that's where I started with this. And but I don't remember the name of it, and I'm curious to see what would show up if I went and looked at something other than what I had used before.
It was the Rizzo, whatever that organization is. That was the test that we initially took. Then, because a lot of us did test for more than one thing, Amy Green came in and used the narrative approach to help us.
That's correct. Yeah, I'm remembering all that.
Help us, figure out among the various options what we were.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Shar.
I was going to say, I kind of have found the narrative approach the most helpful for me. I've read various books that all had, typing and qualities and stuff, and that only made me bounce around more than the narrative was really much more helpful.
I'd forgotten about Amy Green's role. I knew she had been in there someplace, but I'd forgotten the specifics. And yes, that made a big difference.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out as well, Rich, that the narrative tradition has been helpful for you. I'm being trained as a teacher in the narrative, and so that's my bias. So I wanted to give a little bit of space for other ideas to come out there, but I'll hop on this boat. It is most helpful and really most ethical for an individual to type themselves. And so, there are different ways that you can gather information. And one of the common ways people start is they're on Facebook and they see a little Facebook quiz they can take, and they're like, oh, what's the Enneagram? And some small quiz will pop up and tell you exactly what your number is. And if they get it close to right, that might make you think this is worth looking into. But if they get it close to wrong, then it can turn people off to the Enneagram pretty quickly. So online tests are not always super helpful. But if you're already curious about the Enneagram and you want to learn more, you can take an online test. I know Eclectic Energies is a website that has a couple of good tests on there, and they'll give you the top 3 from your testing. And they might even show you a graph that gives you all of the numbers, if I'm recalling now. And you can sift through that information and check out the top 3 that you tested as, and you can do that by reading. Rizzo Hudson has a great book called The Wisdom of the Enneagram. They have some little tests you can do with a pencil in that book. But the narrative tradition poses that the best source of information for each type structure is learning about that type structure from those individuals themselves. And so interviews, whether they're one-on-one or a panel, can give you insight into not just the didactic concept related to a type structure, but the way that those type structures sound and look and feel as they're answering questions. And, even Debbie was able to say, well, I keep referring to my thinking, don't I?
Yeah, right.
Find that I'm a head type. And that can really help you narrow down which type structures to look at. If you're feeling like you might be a head type, you might lean toward wanting to use this as your primary mode of communicating with yourself, with God, with others. Then maybe you're a head type, and you can look at 5, 6, and 7 before you try exploring all the types. Because again, the idea is to learn the habits of this personality structure that is really not you, and finding some flexibility so that you can be yourself and be that beautiful child of God that you have been created to be and meant to be. And the Enneagram can help it can be a great tool to help you on that spiritual journey. Okay, I'm curious, as I narrated sort of the Enneagram as a guidepost on a spiritual journey, when I just ask you in general what spiritual journey means to you, what are some of the concepts or images or words that come to mind?
Learning. Seeing something that I may have understood only in one way, especially having been around the Christian church for as long as I can remember, and thinking, oh, well, I always thought of this way, and then I find another way to look at it. And then I tell people I'm a bit of a word nerd, and so if it's New Testament stuff, I'll go dig into what the Greek word might have meant. So that makes me even more of a nerd. Learning to live with the gray areas. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this thing you've got up here right now of Adrian. I thought I saw something here. Well, the drawn to learning is a big thing, but and then sometimes the obey or question authority has something, just because it's always been done that way does not mean and I question a lot of stuff, especially these days. And then if I find an approach that makes sense to me, again, we're back to the sense, we're back to that. I'm going, oh, well, I'm not so deficient after all. Which is,
I hear that as like a journey toward trusting yourself again. Like you start off with maybe thinking you have some sense of things. You realize, oh, this is way more complicated than I thought. There's a lot more perspectives, but then get right back to the sense of self-trust. I've heard a close friend of mine who's a 6 has said, over the years, I've often realized that my very first instinct was correct. Even after I spent so much time exploring and asking for decision by committee, as we'll see on this chart, asking other people's perspectives or at least questioning my own and doing research. And 3 years later, I actually should have bought that Honda that I thought I should have gotten in the first place. Does that resonate? I'm seeing Rich laugh over there.
Well, yes and no. The word that you had said earlier jumped out at me, and that is trust. And for me, part of, I think also why I identify as a 6 is because my relationship with God is highly trusting, and a sense that I'm held in God's hands. And this world is held in God's hands, despite all the pandemic, the incredible racial conflict, the evil that seems to be at the heart of our political discourse that's just manipulating fear. And somehow I still have this abiding trust that God is faithful, and that in my taking on my role, I can do so because God cares for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that trust is, it's always something that has been a bedrock for me. And my wife and I talk, because she's very different, and I often wonder, why did I deserve to just kind of have this trusting nature when other people can feel so riddled by doubt and whatever. And so it's a both and kind of thing of in the midst of this world of conflict and pain and whatever, God's faithfulness is paramount for me.
Rich, you used both with the image of your hands and with your words, the image of being held.
Yeah.
And that is the most common way that I've heard sixes describe spiritual experience. And one of the ways that in early meditations for sixes that are learning how to meditate, the first one that a lot of Enneagram work recommends is whether you're sitting down and beginning yoga or you're sitting in your chair at work, is just to notice that what is holding you up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Ground will hold you up.
Yeah, just notice what's holding you up, and then go from that microcosm and move to the macro. And before you know it, you realize, you're sitting on this spinning ball that's hanging in space, and you are alive. And and your whole world is happening, life is happening. And you realize the improbability of it all, and yet here you are, and you are held. You are being held up, and that kind of move from that micro to the macro can give that quality of feeling cared for and trust for the six. So thank you for sort of closing us with that beautiful image of the spirituality of the six. And as we wrap up, I would just like to close with this prayer from Sandra Smith. As I named last week, she has written a prayer for each type and names God differently based on that type structure. And in this prayer, God is referred to as sacred ground of my being.
Wow.
So let us pray. Sacred ground of my being, you are within me and beyond me, forever present. Your love enfolds me as I go about my days. I am not alone. My suspicions fade when held in your unwavering assurance of me. Empty me now of my anxieties and imaginings, assuage my fears. Create in me a refuge for trusting myself. Remind me of my inner resources and power. You are within me, to be called forth in trust so I may stand on my own solid foundation. Knowing your steady ground holds me up, I move forward in an uncertain world. Guide me as I travel the path of courage, so I may lean into myself when the waters are troubled, having faith in the unfolding, growing into my own authority. Hold me in the fearful times, hold me in the fearless times. In your holy ground, I rise to offer my full and powerful self in each moment. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you both. I'm so grateful for your presence today. It's a joy to get to know you in this special way. And I hope you'll join us as we look toward the Enneagram 5 in a couple more weeks.
Great.
Great.